Welcome to BAM, Badass Moms with Lori and Jenny. We are moms on a mission to share women's stories about life, fitness, aging, relationships, travel, and much more. Hello, friends, and thanks for listening. I just wanted to take a second to give you a quick reminder about subscribing to the show. If you have not already, just take a moment and do so. This will make sure that you never miss a daily bite or an upcoming episode. And in addition to that, if you have a few extra moments and like to drop us a review, we'd really appreciate it. And there's also a sponsor of the show located at the bottom of all of our episodes. Once again, thank you for listening. Thank you for being badass. Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us on another episode of the BAM with Lori and Jenny. Today, we have a super special episode because we have Shawnta Hooks here in person with Jenny and I, and it's so special when we get to actually meet our guest in person. Shawnta has a whole list of amazing things she's done. She is a keynote speaker, writer, and a belonging strategist. She has over 2 decades of experience in tech and risk. She fuses mindfulness with leadership development to help teams thrive, adapt, and perform at their best, all while staying grounded and authentic. I know Jenny has a little more to add. So, Jenny?
Shawnta is a Detroit native, currently living in Atlanta, had corporate experience in financial services and public accounting and internal audit. Now does keynote speaking, and you launched your own company, and it is Mindful Culture Creations.
Yep, Mindful Culture Creators.
Creators. Great. So we're going to talk about all the fun things. And she's a badass mom, which I love.
And her son is the same age as my son, which is such a lovely time.
It is the sweet
8-year-olds. Yeah. It is, like, they're still cute and cuddly.
Yeah.
But they also want their independence, but they still want to snuggle with their mommies.
Yes, they do.
Right. But they get a little heavier. Like, I can still pick my son up.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know how much longer this is going to happen. But welcome. We're so excited to have you in person. We want to know all about your journey, where you started, what led you to your current path. You are in, like, leadership for mindfulness. So I guess, like, when I hear that, it makes me think that you help people really understand, like, how to take a breath, how to, like, evaluate their current selves, all the things that are going on, and really be in touch with being mindfulness. So if you want to talk a little bit about that, because I think that would be great.
Yeah, that's a great start, because it really is like the foundation of the way I parent my son and the way I relate to humans. But the way I see mindful leadership and the work that I do is really helping organizations transform, workplace culture. And really get it from this space, and I started my career in the early 2000s where it really was hustle culture. It really was less about the human experience and even the why do we work, like zooming way out and, how does the work we do benefit the collective? Like, how does it benefit everything, right? It was really just about production, especially working in internal audit and accounting and financial services. It's so performance driven that so much of my career was spent really not understanding how to show up as a human being at work and how to accept others as human beings at work, right? My mind constantly being in the past or in the future, ruminating and revisiting things that happened, positive or negative, these stories that, that stick with you, and never really fully being immersed in the now because you're stuck there, or you're in the future, right? Planning and forecasting, or, all of these things that we do. And so there was never, for me, until I started to really find meditation as a lifestyle practice, that was never a part of my language, right? It wasn't a part of my language. It wasn't a part of my lifestyle. And as a result, even though I had a very successful career, I always say pre-meditation for me, which was like really when I had my son. That's when I started meditating. So let's just say pre-2017.
That's a good time to start.
Absolutely.
I was going to say that.
And I can go into how
I need to just take a moment.
Yeah. That really is the start of it. But Shawnta, pre-2017, successful in the career, but really uncomfortable in my own skin and really uncomfortable with conflict at work and not knowing how to assert myself and all of these things. And then I find meditation and I start to not just do it, but I start to understand why people do it, And one of my favorite books on the topic is Mindfulness in Plain English. And he talks about how many people think that meditation is about finding joy and peace and happiness and bliss. And he's like, those are byproducts of meditation. They can be byproducts because sometimes meditation is not peaceful.
Right.
Sometimes it's frustrating and it's very uncomfortable. Right. But those are often byproducts. But the reason that we meditate is because we're human. And to be human is to experience life in all of its forms, the joy and the pain, and knowing how to constantly get back to center, from the past, from the future, and back here when you want to, like on demand. Understanding that really is a hack. And that's actually the name of my keynote is Presence is the Hack. Because once I learned that, it helped me realize the superpower of, switching into the emotion, the experience that I need to be my best self, whether that's at work, whether that's in personal relationships, whether that is as it relates to, my role as a mom.
It takes less time for you to get that switch turned on.
Absolutely.
Now? Okay.
Absolutely. Because it's conditioning, right? You think of it as a runner, right? Yeah. If you start out running, you don't just start off with the marathon, right? And your body is not conditioned for that yet. And so the conditioning is making those small habits starting out. If you don't currently, and this is for anyone that's listening right now, if you don't currently have a meditation or mindfulness practice in your lifestyle, it can start with putting a placeholder on your calendar. You can call it a pause, put it on your calendar, because if nothing else, you'll see it. Just the act of seeing it will sometimes just trigger you to take a deep breath.
Right.
Maybe you don't have time to set a timer and, stop, but you can take 3 deep breaths. We all have that ability. And the science says that taking deep breaths is the conditioning that helps train our nervous system. So a little science knowledge for you. We have a nervous system. There's 2 parts to the nervous system. The sympathetic, which is the stress, the fight, flight, freeze, and the parasympathetic, which is the state that you're in when you're in rest and digest. And we're constantly transitioning from one to the other. Some people know how to transition more efficiently than others. And so the conditioning that we're talking about is training your body to, when the act happens, the trigger, the discomfort, the displacement, when it happens, when you get to safety, right? When you're truly logically in a state of safety where you no longer need that adrenaline, that cortisol, so on and so forth, can you quickly navigate to a sense of safety? The meditation teaches you how to do that more efficiently. And I know this for a fact because I had a scan done. I went to it. I had a scan done. I went to a chiropractor about three years ago. And this particular chiropractor did a scan of my nervous system to measure. And it was just basically, she told me to just sit still. Scan? And she hooked these sensors up to me, and she's checking my heart rate variability. But essentially, she told me she's testing the efficiency of my nervous system, traveling from sympathetic to parasympathetic.
I would fail. I know. I'd be like, oh my gosh.
And she noticed that, well, the scan was for me, or the instruction was to sit still and just do nothing. And then there were going to be like certain sounds and certain things that would simulate, right, the need for me to go into these different states. And then there would be quiet and calm. And then this was constant on and off. And I just sat there. I actually treated it like a meditation. And when she came back, she looked at the scan and she said, I can tell you meditate.
Interesting.
And I said, how? And she said, because and I can't remember the exact language, but basically like my percentages were like in the 90s. Which was extremely high, based on her observation, meaning that my nervous system was very, very efficient at transitioning from that state of fight and flight, fright, freeze to rest and digest.
Yeah.
And that's because I've conditioned it to be that way over time by bringing mindfulness into my lifestyle in a disciplined way for a period. And that was the time when I had my son up until, still now, but especially in those early days, driving to work and sitting in my car, playing a meditation for 20 minutes.
So that's a good question. So like for people that do not currently meditate, and I'll be honest, I don't actually have a time in the day where I meditate. I kind of like look at like the exercise I do during my day or when I'm kind of like disconnecting. That's kind of my version of it, but it's by no means like actually having a focused time to meditate. Like, did you have to start off by adding, like you said, add it in your calendar, but then really being diligent to just every day, like put that time aside and really, building up, right? Because if you told somebody, go meditate for 30 minutes, they're going to be like, what? Yeah. 5 or 10, like how to get people to create that habit, because it is hard, right? Because although it's a small amount of time, it's a small amount of time of like complete focus.
Yep. Yeah, the French philosopher Blaise Pascal once said that all of humanity's problems would cease to exist if humans could sit alone in a room with their own thoughts by themselves.
Oh.
And it is to your point, and this is something that was said, I think, in the 1700s or something like that, right? And it is very difficult. So for me, and I think for most human beings, because most of us didn't grow up with meditation being a focal point,
right.
Or talked about. It wasn't a part of our language. And so the first step for me was getting to a place of understanding and shifting my mindset on what it is. Right. And so that's the first step that I encourage people to do is make it a priority to learn it. Right. Mm-hmm. Watch a couple podcasts, read, not necessarily read books, but when you notice articles that come up in your news feed that mention mindfulness and meditation, or maybe follow a few content creators on social media. You can follow me, Shawnta Hooks, on all platforms. But when that content comes up, just pay attention. Pay attention to it. And so that's like first step is starting to change your mindset on it. And then absolutely starting with small doses. For me, the entry point was music. I know a lot of people will say I am mindful in my exercise and my fitness. Mindful movement is very much a part of my lifestyle, but I really do challenge people to bring in stillness.
Yeah. Yep.
Right? Because mindfulness in and of itself, the definition that I give for mindfulness is paying attention to the present moment on purpose without judgment.
Okay.
Right. So it's being in the present moment on purpose.
Hard.
Without judgment.
I know. Very, very hard. I didn't say it was easy.
That sounds so hard.
What I didn't say is that it's sitting a certain way.
Right.
I didn't mention breath work. I didn't mention it's just being in the present moment. So therefore, anything can be your mindfulness practice. Yeah. Your fitness, your movement, your spending time with your family, your work, anything that you do on purpose with an intention of being in the present moment and without judgment, without necessarily judging the experience, just being. Those are mindfulness experiences. However, I will add that most people have a hard time with stillness.
Yeah.
Right? Stillness, really sitting still. And so music is a nice entry point. We can be still, but have something in the audio or guided meditations, right? They're timed. So, and when I say music, just any song that you like. It doesn't have to be a meditation song.
Okay.
It doesn't have
to be. That's good to know, because I think when people think of meditation, it has to be some kind of calm, flowy, all the things, right?
And I also think people think that it's getting better, but people think it's more woo-woo. And that's why I love when you describe the science behind it, because I don't think people realize that, that there's actually data.
Thousands of studies.
Yeah.
It's been studied in the most interesting ways, over the last, I would say 100 years, if not more. But, and the sound, the science of sound, right? And understanding how sound impacts our nervous systems as well. Because again, that's what we're doing. We're training ourselves to come back to center, to come back to the now. And so for me, it was starting with contemporary music, and noticing that not just noticing how I felt in the moment, but noticing the music itself.
Yeah.
And so it was a little short story. I remember one of the first times that I felt like I got meditation right. I meditated to a song by the soul group, Frankie Beverly and Mays.
Okay.
And the song is called Joy and Pain. And it's a song that I've heard my entire life.
Yeah. Right.
It's a mid-tempo song. It's not a meditation song. Yeah. This is classic R&B from the 70s.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I just decided to I was at a spa. I put my headphones on, and I said, I'm going to make this the focus of my meditation. And as soon as the song came on, I noticed in the song a snap. There's a snap that's very repetitive throughout the song. And I said, I'm going to make that snap the focus of my meditation. And the song's about maybe 4 minutes long. Okay. And as I close my eyes, and I do think closing the eyes is really, really important, because you get to shut off one of your primary senses, right? So that you can focus more on other senses, such as your sense of sound. I close my eyes and I have the timer already set, which is the music. And I instantly noticed just the interesting aspect of what that sound was like, that snap, right? I got really curious about the snap. And I started to notice that one snap was different from the next snap, right? And it just made for this really interesting experience, right? And it made the time go by so quickly.
Yeah, and the song changed. You heard it in a different way than you
heard it
before.
In an extremely different way. It was no longer background music, right? Or even, music at an event, a celebratory event, or on the radio. This is now a focal point. This is because that's what I'm practicing. I'm practicing focus. I'm anchoring my focus on the sound. And then I wasn't so strict about it that I stayed on the snap. Right. Sometimes I'd move to the drums. Yeah. Sometimes I'd move to the rhythm, right? Yeah.
Because when you do that, first of all, that musician is going to be so grateful, because
so grateful.
You're noticing small details,
absolutely,
right?
Absolutely.
You can't unhear it after that.
Yep.
So then every time you hear that song, that's what you hear it again. It's almost like you've learned something new. You can't unlearn it.
You can't unlearn it, right? And you can do that with anything. I mean, of course, I recommend positive, music that resonates
of course,
in a positive way.
Of course.
But, I'm talking Stevie Wonder and the Beatles and, all of this like very high vibrational music. Instrumentals are great for this, jazz instrumentals, and just allow yourself to be curious.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's what we're talking. We're talking non-judgmental curiosity. And when you start to practice that, right, you start with the music and then you can work your way up to sounds that are a bit more unfamiliar. Mm-hmm. And this is where YouTube and guided meditations come into play, again, in a container. And I suggest starting with 5 to 10 minutes. Right? Nothing that is too intense, much doable. And you'll notice in the beginning, and I teach classes all over the world, and I've talked to thousands of people, and they all say the same thing. The first couple of minutes, you're wondering when it's going to end.
It's like running.
It's like heated yoga for me. I'm like,
that's literally it.
Is this over yet?
And then you settle in, right? You settle in.
Right.
And then most people say it was a lot faster than I thought it was going to be. But whatever it is, maybe it felt like an hour.
Yeah.
That's okay, right? The intention behind this is to practice acceptance of everything that's happening now. And if you really want to challenge yourself, you increase the time. You can get to 20, 30, sometimes 40. People meditate that are not meditation teachers, right?
Yeah.
People will do, longer meditations based on their need. One, because they believe in it. Right? Nobody's going to sit still for 40 minutes if they don't believe in it.
Yeah.
But two, not just believing in it, but believing in the transformative benefits of it. And you believe it because it happens in your life, right? And so what I always tell people is, don't listen to what I'm saying. Try it for yourself.
Right. Because that's when people believe it, right?
That's
when they start to feel and see like the experience and then
the shift.
Yeah, the
Absolutely.
shift. Exactly.
Before we started officially having the conversation, I was sharing with you about my daughter who called last night in a panic. And I could so relate to what she was saying because she was like, she's a sophomore in college and she's like, I'm stressed out and I have to do this and I have to do this. And when I listen to her, I can hear the things that are non-essential, right? That are non-essential or that like maybe she could delegate. But she's in this space of she can't think rationally, clearly, formulate solutions. And you kind of talked a little bit about like the fight, flight, freeze, cortisol. Can you take us through a little bit of that? Like, cause I feel like that. I'll get all spun up. Even yesterday, I was like, oh my God, I have so much to do. How am I going to get it all done? And I left it and came back this morning and I looked at my computer and I was
wasn't as much, right?
What the fuck? It was not that bad. It was not that bad. And I was like, why was I panicking?
Yeah.
So,
And the science of it, starting with the science, and I always use, really simple explanations just so that people can kind of bring attention to what's happening. So like in that moment, your daughter, what was likely happening is the part of her brain, there's a small part of the brain called the amygdala. And that part of the brain, similar to the sympathetic nervous system, it controls your fight, flight, freeze. It sends signals related to, stress, and it activates, right? But conversely, you have the prefrontal cortex, which is our CEO of the brain, the decision-making aspect of the brain. When the amygdala is overactive, the prefrontal cortex is not as active. And so in that moment with your daughter, you were able to see things that she wasn't able to see because likely her prefrontal cortex wasn't as active because she's stuck in that amygdala, what they call sometimes neuroscientists will call this an amygdala hijack, right? You're not in that space, so you can see much more clearly. And so the goal is to get out of that. Well, the goal is to first notice it from external. I mean, I use this language all the time, like for myself, like, oh, my amygdala is it's just amygdala hijack. Take some deep breath.
It's like the little thing on your shoulder, right? Like the little devil. That's
that's all it is. I'm just in a state of fight, flight, freeze. It makes sense. I will take deep breaths. I know what to do. I've been conditioning myself to know. It's almost like a math equation. If this, then that. Okay. If overwhelm, stress, anxiety, my mode now is deep breaths. Okay. Like I don't even have to think about it. That is, and it's not a cure. Sure. It doesn't mean like you're automatically, but taking those deep breaths, I know over time, the more that I do that, the more that amygdala will relax, the more that my prefrontal cortex will activate and I'll start to see, greater paths to what it is that I need to do in my life. And the more you train yourself to do that, the faster it happens. Okay. Right. And so again, I always go back to, making this a ritual. Really, especially as moms, I know this podcast is really dedicated to moms. We by nature wear so many hats, right? Baseline, I say this is an age of overstimulation, right? Post-COVID, technological advances out the wazoo, life-changing, political change, economic change, like everything right now feels like overstimulation. Yeah. And it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. And so therefore, as a risk manager, right, that was my job for over 20 years. was to evaluate and help organizations navigate risk, not eliminate it, but navigate it.
Yeah.
And the language we use in risk management are controls.
Yeah.
Right. You have controls that are designed to mitigate risk by either detecting the risk or preventing the risk. Right? Stopping the risk.
Yep.
You have controls designed for each one. And so my theory is that right now, mindfulness and meditation are the controls that we need right now to mitigate the risk of overstimulation.
More than ever.
More than ever.
Right? More than ever.
More than ever.
Yep.
It's not a nice to have, right? Meditation, and I understand, different people have different spiritual and religious, acclamations and ideologies. It's interesting how it fits in every religion, right?
Yeah.
It truly does.
Yeah.
And so if you see prayer as meditation, then see that as meditation.
Yep.
But what I will call people to, as I said before, is stillness.
Yeah.
Right? Finding stillness, finding that 5 to 10 minutes to just sit still, close your eyes. And I will encourage sound if silence is too difficult, but, really allowing stillness to be a point, that you prioritize in your life, starting 5 to 10 minutes. 20 minutes, the science says, is when you really get the benefit. 20 minutes, 8 weeks. So if you want to really challenge yourself, devoting 20 minutes, and maybe it's just starting with a couple of times a week.
Right. And how, I think in today's age of just, like you said, technology and phones and constant distractions, it's very, very hard for us, right? Because back in the day, there wasn't a phone. If you're standing in line at the grocery store, you had to be standing in the line at the grocery store.
Right.
Now you're like, I'm going to look at my phone. And it's one of those things that we just don't know how to be there in that moment because we want to be somewhere else or we want to be distracted and we can't just appreciate. So I think harder than ever, but that's why it's so important.
And another hack, I usually don't mention this, but it just came to me, especially for moms, because again, it doesn't feel like time is on our side. Mm-hmm. So we have to sort of, again, reframe and make different perspective shifts. Something that I did a lot, and I still do it, is falling to sleep to affirmations.
Yeah.
Right.
I do that.
Yeah. Falling to sleep to affirmations, falling to sleep to meditations, because you're getting the same benefit.
That doesn't work because I do it. And right now my headphones, I actually just ordered a new thing this morning because I don't want to wake up my husband.
Yeah.
Although he's good about it, but he thinks it's weird. Right.
Yeah.
So I listen to it every night and I'm like, I hope this is sinking in. Is this working?
Yeah. And it works when you believe it works. Mostly.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's really around understanding how belief systems work, right? Beliefs are thoughts.
Yep.
You have thoughts that over time, those thoughts develop into beliefs. And so the more you do it and you allow the pattern to form, that's when the subconscious starts to change, and that's why we're doing the affirmations at night, is to just start, again, conditioning. You're doing all these things to really condition yourself. But it really, and especially, as moms, I would recommend affirmations that focus less on, I am wealthy or
right. I will win the lottery.
Yeah. Maybe find, and you can go on YouTube, there's, I would, especially at night, recommend videos that have black screens. Right. Just that you are cut there. You can literally search black screen affirmations.
Okay.
But you can search, adding into the search affirmations that are around your beliefs around self-care.
Oh, I
right.
Like that.
You're really shifting your beliefs because you'll hear things that resonate with you.
Yeah.
Right. Like, oh yes. Right. Like, oh yeah, I needed that. Oh yeah. And the more you get those, oh yeah moments, as opposed to just being, phrases that don't really resonate.
Whatever.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. It's really taking some time to find the ones where you find yourself saying, ooh, right. A lot. And then that's the one you maybe listen to at night, 10 minutes before you go to bed or
that's falling asleep to it.
Wonderful about that.
Yep. And then, then we were talking about this before, as well, but, really reframing our mindset on taking care of ourselves. And I'm, hesitant to use the phrase self-care because I think it triggers, these ideas of spas and, and
I know.
things like that feel like more luxury or fringe. But taking care of yourself, right? Like cleaning your home is a form of self-care.
Yes.
Washing your hair and,
taking a shower as a mom, ladies. Take a shower. That's really important.
Right. Phoning friends, community, right?
Yeah.
These are all, and again, these are things that we have to be intentional about.
Yeah.
And I would another word that I've been using a lot lately is disciplined about. So much. And I always say discipline is a path to freedom, right? Freedom without discipline is chaos. And the more we understand the discipline that is necessary in this age, you know, right? You pick up your phone, go to YouTube to try to find a black screen meditation. You're met with 5,000 other tiles and other distractions, right? And so it's like a test. The only way you can pass the test, and passing the test equals just going to the black screen meditation.
Collecting what you
instead of like getting distracted.
By the podcast and by the entertainment and all of these things, right? The more you can cultivate that level of focus to be able to cut through the distraction that is not, because we can't change that. It's not going away. So the more you can like really zoom in and be focused in more areas of your life and practice that with intention, the more that you'll find that, especially as a mom, that those moments where you're overwhelmed and it feels like the world is really like just needing everything from you right now, and there is no path out of it. Like, I get like that all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Believe me. And people think like, because I'm someone that is, you know, an advocate and an expert in meditation, that I'm just zen all the time, because even the pressure I put on myself, you know, and my negative thoughts, right? They might sound different from yours, but there's still these negative thoughts. Like, am I a fraud? Right? Because I'm experiencing, you know, this distraction and this overwhelm and doom scrolling and all of these things. Like, I didn't meditate this morning. Does that make me a fraud?
Right. It makes you human, which I think is lovely and I think relatable. And, you know, I think one of the things that I constantly remind my 8-year-old is I'm like, mom is a person too.
Oh, I love that.
Mom is
so
a person
good at that.
too, because,
good at that.
you know, he'll say things sometimes or like, and I'm like, mom has emotions. Like, you know, reminding him like, and I think he takes a moment. He's like, oh yeah, like, you're older than me and you're my mom. Like, you're a person too. Like, that makes you happy or that makes you sad, or you're crying because you had a hard day or whatever it is. So I think that's important to just, for kids, like just kind of those little reminders, like, we're all people, right? And we all have those experiences. So I think when you say, you know, oh my gosh, am I doing everything that I'm preaching? Well, probably not, because you're human.
Because I'm human.
But you're doing the best you can.
I know.
Right?
That's right. Yeah.
And I think that's so lovely. Okay, so we've talked a lot about mindfulness. I want to go back when it started and how you juggled when you had your son. You were in the corporate world. What that meant, were you working full time? And then kind of that, which, as I say, that kind of took you to lead your own path. You know, get out of the corporate world and say, you know what, it's been fun, but peace out. I want to go do my own thing.
It's like, how much time do you have?
I know.
Like Sophia, I love the show Golden Girls.
Oh my gosh. And you know, hold on. I heard with the Golden Girls, and I was like, are you serious? That when they were taping the Golden Girls,
they're younger than me.
Were like 55 or a different age of where people were in their lives. We live longer. We're in better health, I think. But you know,
there's also a Golden Girls drag show in Denver, apparently, that I have to now see.
Yeah, they're all over. It's a very popular drag.
I want to go to that.
It's an incredible show. It has a huge LGBT following. But yeah, picture it. You know, April 2017. Right. Atlanta, Georgia. Pregnant with my son Amir. And I decide that I want to have a natural childbirth. That was just something that was very important to me. I was not a meditator at the time. I was not someone that even really believed in meditation. I'm an accountant. I am a risk manager. I am a very quantitative person. I deal in numbers and facts. And despite being in a very unique way surrounded by meditation through my father and my brother and, you know, these people that, you know, it was a part of their lifestyle. It still was not a part of mine. But when I was pregnant, I had a doula. And the doula really, of course, supported my desire to have a natural childbirth. And she suggested yoga and meditation as tools to help me. And I didn't understand at the time from a scientific perspective, but really it was training me to be present with my body to be able to navigate pain. Right. And that's a whole nother conversation.
Right.
But I started to go to yoga classes, and, you know, at the end of yoga, you have savasana, and it's the meditative portion of it. And I would just use that to really get in tune with my son and talk to him. And it became this really lovely experience. Fast forward, I have my son. And I'm no longer really doing meditation and yoga. But I have my maternity leave. I think I took like 3 months off. I had a nice lengthy maternity leave. I returned to work on a Monday, find out on Thursday that I am laid off.
Oof. What?
Yes. Terrible experience, right? Little felt like FMLA discrimination. Right, which I absolutely leveraged to get a better severance package. And I think conditioning myself to be mindful and fearless helped, ironically prepare me for that conversation. So it was a beautiful blessing in disguise because it gave me more time, right? I had to, now find a job. I was able to get a severance package. And when I got my new job, I was promoted. So I went from a manager to a vice president.
Oh my God.
And now I have my own office. And so even going back to work, I have an office so that I can pump and still have this lifestyle. And so but again, meditation had largely left my life, at that point. I decide to take a new job. I became vice president. So I got this job as vice president. I got promoted to another role a couple of years into that, as VP of Transformation and AI. Automation transformation leader, which this is 2018. So I want to preface that by saying, this is, and I'm working actually with the technology that, is the backbone for AI as we know it today, Python. Cool. So it was a really interesting role, but I was met with a lot of fear. Yeah. So I'm responsible for automating processes. And so, of course, people see me as the job killer.
Yes.
You're taking my job.
Now.
In a different way back then. Yeah. And so it was a very stressful job. It was a job that was born out of reorganization, and it wasn't necessarily the best environment. There was a lot of toxicity in the culture. And I was just stressed in a way that I had never been stressed before. In addition to being a new mom, in addition to having a new job, and then in addition to being in a relationship that was starting to end, that was just starting to kind of fall apart, all at the same time. And then meditation started to appear to me. Mm-hmm. It just started to show up, at a conference, and you hear someone mention, you hear a facilitator mention it, and you see people with books, and this is pre-COVID, right? So it wasn't in our atmosphere the way that it is now. Yeah. And then, I'll never forget, I was at a conference, someone said it, I paid attention to it more. I left the conference. This was June of 2018. I left the conference and decided I wanted to learn. And so I think maybe a week later, I found a video on YouTube. It was literally how to start meditating. No lie. It's a 5-minute video, and it totally changed my life, because when he explained meditation as this tool that you use to, get to the present moment, which feels very abstract, but really a tool to regulate your nervous system. Mm. And when he used these really grounded language, and I was like, okay, that makes sense. And now I can actually understand why it helped me through childbirth. Yeah. And I did, by the way, have my son with with little to no medical intervention. And I remember being able to breathe through the pain, right? And so I'm like, the way he's I'm like, so, okay, there's this correlation between breathing through physical pain and breathing through the pain of life, right? Yeah. Breathing through the pain of feeling like I'm being disrespected at work. Yes. Breathing through the pain of this relationship that is ending. Breathing through the pain of being a mom and my son's crying and I don't know what to do to stop it, right? All of those. I'm like, okay, I'm seeing this. And that 5-minute video led to me sitting in stillness and just trying it and listening to what he said. Just notice your breath. Notice the rise and fall of your chest. Know that your mind is going to wander. People say all the time, I can't meditate. And I teach this in my classes now. They say I can't meditate because my mind won't stop wandering and racing. And my response is always the same. Your mind is designed to think. Right. It will think during meditation. The goal is to sort of zoom out of yourself and notice where your thoughts are. Okay. And once you notice that your mind is in a place that it represents the past or the future, not the now, then you can just bring it back. Sort of like a dog, right? You're training a dog. You want the dog to stay because he's getting ready to go over here. You can bring it back to here. Right. And you have this container, this 5, 10, 15-minute space to practice that, to do it over and over again. So I'm like, I can do that. So I tried it and I noticed my chest rising and falling. And that was a feeling I never noticed before. I never paid attention to what that felt like.
Most of us don't take a deep breath, right? Like most of us, we breathe super shallow.
Right. And when you do, you feel better, right? If you're just like,
and we can do it right now. Let's just take a deep breath together. And when you do it, just notice the physical feeling of it. Yeah. And then so we can just take a deep breath, breathing in through the nose and exhaling through the mouth. And then doing that on your own one more time. And then just, kind of bringing attention or bringing language to what that felt like. Like, did you notice anything in that?
Well, I always feel like, calmer, like, almost like you're floating a little bit. Right.
Like you feel lighter. You feel like you just kind of shed some whatever it is.
Right. Because that's what you're doing. Yeah. You're literally, you're sending signals to the body that say, I'm safe. Yeah. That's what deep breathing, that is the body's mechanism to remind us that we are safe, right? We always have the breath. You can Google any You can Google right now, what is the best way to navigate my nervous system to go from fight, flight, freeze to rest and digest. And deep breathing will always be on that list every single time. That's how vital it is.
So I have a question. So as a mom and, having a child, at what age can you start to help them use these tools?
Yeah, I was going to ask
start meditating, right? Because it is hard. I mean, you have an 8-year-old boy, I have an 8-year-old boy. If you're like, hey, take a minute and just breathe, they're like, ha! And they're off.
And they're boys too.
How do you help them take those moments when they're frustrated or upset or just not thinking things through, properly? What are some tactics?
This is where it goes into meeting them where they are, right? And again, going back to that notion, allowing things to work as they're designed. Okay. Allow the mind to work as it's designed. It's think we're observing. The same with our children. Allow them to move, but really starting with your presence. You first have to be able to manage your own presence and then role model it for them. And so with my son and early in this journey, when I decided to make it a lifestyle habit, and it's something after, about 6 months, starts in June of 2018. By December, I'm doing it every day. I'm meditating every day. And now he's starting to get older to where I'm finding videos on YouTube, right, that are movement. And I started with movement for him. Not so much stillness, but really finding movement practices that were designed for children. And I have so many videos of him doing his little yoga videos and
that's
stuff.
Cute.
And,
that's cute.
And just, inviting him into the practice and also allowing when I'm doing my stillness practice, communicating that this is what I'm doing, communicating boundaries, understanding that he will cross those boundaries. Most importantly, especially now that he's 8, when I am meditating and he knows that I'm meditating, he will sometimes still come and sit next to me. Sometimes he'll sit on my lap. Sometimes he'll give me little kisses. I don't allow it to be a distraction. I allow it to be part of my experience. And so then I just notice what that feels like. I still close, still for the most part in stillness and just allowing myself to make that, to not disrupt me and thinking like a monk, in that moment, really, if you could imagine or a mountain, right? We're in Colorado. And so you have all these beautiful, majestic mountains, putting yourself in the position of a mountain for that finite time period. And then when the time is over, you can go back and have conversation and, all of those things. But first and foremost, role modeling it and then creating an invitation. With children, it's no different. Teaching children is no different than teaching adults. It's always an invitation. Right. It's always meeting them where they are, but first doing that with yourself. And so going back to my origin story, I start doing it. I make it a lifestyle habit. And then, we start getting into 2019, my relationship falls apart. His dad and I separate. And then 2020 comes. We know what happens in March, right? COVID. And so now by that time, I'm all in on meditation. I picked up Qigong as a lifestyle habit. I was watching documentaries. I had attended classes. I really immersed myself in understanding. And now I'm understanding the data, right? And it's interesting. It's interesting to notice and learn how organizations like Salesforce, very mindful place. It's interesting to notice how all of these companies in Silicon Valley have had mindfulness in their organizational culture for years. Yeah. For years. And I'm reading these articles that dated back to the early 2000s where they're interviewing people like Steve Jobs and, all these different, CEOs. And they're mentioning how transcendental meditation and mindfulness and yoga and these practices help them be a better CEO, help them be a better business leader. So I took that. I just saw it as a need. Right before COVID, I took that information and I went to the chief HR officer of the company of the company I work for. Because again, mindfulness also helps you with bold and courage and confidence. And I said, you just talked about the strategic initiatives for the year, but I've never, and it was all about innovation and creativity. And I'm like, but I've never attended a mindfulness class here. And that's something that is embedded in some of the most innovative organizations that exist. And I would love to talk to you more about maybe some ways we can bring it.
A lot of times it's free.
It's free. It's it's finding people within the organization that can maybe lead it, right? Or leveraging the resources that you've already invested in your EAP program leaders. And so he's like, okay, let's talk. Then COVID hits. And then, of course, it's pandemonium, right? Everyone's stressed out. Not to say that I'm not stressed out, but I absolutely had a different energy from everyone on my team. People took notice. And so they started to kind of talk to me about, well, what are you doing? How are you? And I would explain, and I started to connect it to my story and my origin and with my son and with my father, who was a professional kickboxer before he passed away and had meditation in his lifestyle for a long time without communicating it that way. And so I just created a talk. They asked me to create a session, to an engagement experience virtual for my team. I did that. That was my first keynote, theoretically.
Yeah,
and then that led to being asked to do more.
So it was during COVID.
This was during COVID. The first keynote was during COVID. And after a couple times of doing these virtual sessions, I said, I would love to have a space to talk about this. So I just carved out every third Friday of the month. Let's all get together and I'll curate content and we'll talk about mindfulness at work, how we can bring it to our children, our lives as parents. And it just blew up. It was like eventually, or after about 18 months, there were over 500 people in this community.
That's awesome.
And at some point I said, this is a business.
Yeah, right? You're like, I got this.
This is
right?
a business. Like my business brain doesn't turn on, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, this is a business. And I started my business, Mindful Culture Creators, with the intention of creating workspaces that were cultivating greater belonging within self. First, not necessarily belonging through pizza parties and employee events, but how can I feel a sense of belonging everywhere I go? Yeah. How can I learn how to navigate workplace stress and overwhelm and toxicity, quite frankly? Without the environment changing, how can I always know how to regulate my energy regardless of my environment? And so we would talk about these things, and I started to create workshops. And it just sort of took over my life. And then as I was doing this, everything improved in my corporate experience. I started to get better at my job.
You were still working at your job, but kind of doing this.
Yeah, now I got like 3 jobs.
Now you got more work. Now you're a mom. Now you got your real job.
But that speaks to the capacity that it brings. That it brings. Yeah. We, not to sound woo-woo, right? Yeah. But we as humans really do have unlimited potential. Yeah. And I know people say that all the time, and it's a little hard to contextualize that. But what that means is, and I look at it as collapsing time. When you're really focused, a task that used to take an hour can take 30 minutes, right? We're no different. When you're really focused, you may have only had this much capacity, but now you have this much more capacity. And so that's the value that mindfulness can bring to your life. Suddenly I have the capacity to be now a single mom. I prefer the term co-parent because we're great. We're great friends. We have a great relationship. But being a co-parenting mom, having my corporate job, and at this time I got promoted. I'm now vice president of sales process governance for the whole sales organization at a Fortune 100 bank, having the volunteer mindfulness community, and then launching my own business. And in the midst of that, as fate would have it, I'm on a work call with my boss. I had this amazing boss, got promoted into this amazing role. And I was late to the meeting with my boss because I was facilitating a mindfulness session. And during the Zoom call with my boss, he suddenly has a heart attack and dies.
That is just like,
I don't even know where you go. Like,
he has a heart attack. And even in that moment, being able to get to a place, go from, talk about nervous system disruption. Talk about the amygdala, right? Like I know what was happening in my body, and I'm a human. So I was very much afraid, very much rattled, right? Calling his name.
You didn't know that he had passed away, obviously. You just saw that he collapsed, right?
He had a medical episode. And I had to figure out what to do because this is on Zoom, right?
Right. So he was home.
He was home, but I don't know his address. There, right? I don't know how to alert authorities. But the focus. I looked at my computer, and also even like a little synchronicity and coincidence, comes into play, right? Because I look at the bottom of my computer, and as fate would have it, his assistant's name is on the bottom of my computer screen, which normally that's not the case. Okay. I pick up my phone because I have her number and immediately call her. She knows who to call. So she calls his wife and his family, and then I have to sit there and watch, them go through this panic and me tell them, call the paramedics, and the paramedics arrive, and then disconnecting the Zoom and then getting a call 10 minutes later saying that he was no longer here.
My gosh.
And so again, disruption that I could have never predicted. I would have never in a million years predicted that would happen to me. And so my default response, even as a mindfulness, all of these things, was to keep going. Right. It's like, of course, I'm, internalizing it as purpose driven. Like, this obviously happened for a reason and why and all this.
Of course.
But at the same time, it's like, but I need to process this alone. So I did. I took a sabbatical. I took a 1-year sabbatical from work and really just dug into, what this means as a human, as a leader, as an employee. Like, what does disruption really look like, and how can we truly regulate that experience from the inside out? And when that sabbatical ended, it was very clear that this was the path that I was supposed to be on. So I resigned from my corporate job, and they were so supportive. It was an incredible company. And I've been doing this work full time ever since, with him really as the inspiration. Not from the perspective that, don't work so hard that you could die at work, right? But
although that does apply.
Right.
Absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely applies, right? Because all disease is stress related. right? And stress is something that we can regulate, but also knowing what to do during disruption, right? Knowing, and disruption can look like anything, right? But knowing how to get back to center and then creating programs that bring that to life, creating simulation-based programs through, I call it the Clarity Lab, creating a container where people can go into this lab and learn from my experience. I consider myself to be a storyteller. Yeah. So being able to tell these really interesting, rich, sometimes even traumatic stories that, hit people emotionally, because that's how we truly do change and transform, is first with experience and the emotional of it all, but then the practicality, understanding the science, and then giving them space to try it for themselves.
So how did you get your name out there? Obviously, you had so many people that were loving what you were doing at your previous company, and then you kind of took this jump. Are you able to go to large companies and say, hey, I've got this great, how would you want to call it? Like seminar or whatever it is that I want to share with your employees. Like, what did you do to really market yourself? Because I think a lot of entrepreneurs in general, like, that's hard, right? No matter how good you are at what you do, like getting yourself out there. What did you find, like some of the struggles and some of the things that were just easy?
I'm a big fan of coaches.
Yeah.
And so I usually hire a coach about once a year. Okay. Bring in someone that can be that consultant to me. Because so much of what you just said, like, how do you source clients? How do you do this? It's mindset. It's because the answer is not hard. It's reaching into your personal network.
We know that.
It's going on LinkedIn. It's going to networking events. Those are all the things that I did. But the thing that would sometimes stop me from doing those things was my thoughts. It's the negative thoughts that come up, that ruminate, that tell me,
like, I'm not going to be good enough.
I've been an entrepreneur before. This is not my first time. I've had a corporate career. I've always known that I was an entrepreneur at heart, but that safety net of a job and being from Detroit, right, in a very industrial city that is very much rooted in, safety and stability. And so, but thinking back to, I've been an entrepreneur before and it didn't work out, right? But having a coach to help me with my mindset, right? And then just taking, like they say, Rome wasn't built overnight. Right. It's built brick by brick. And so going into my personal relationships, the real kicker was being able to be vulnerable, and really tell these stories that differentiate me as a speaker. Nobody has the stories that I have. No one has the experiences that I have. And I can't just, sit on those or reserve them for the stage or reserve them. Like, I have to let people know why I do this work, because it's very much passion. It's I love humans. A lot of people are like, humans suck. If the world would be so much better without humans. I have a very different perspective. I love humanity. I have a very, what I call pronoia mindset. I've always been a very positive person, because to me, the data supports it, right? That everything truly is working for my best interest. Even that moment of seeing my boss die, that being there with him meant that he got to die with someone that knew how to handle a crisis. He got to be present with me, his assistant, who he loved, who had worked with him for years and years, his wife and his daughter. He got to go peacefully. He got to go with dignity. He gifted me all these stories. He was an incredible leader. I developed a whole leadership philosophy based on his memory. I continue to think about the last words that he was telling me, which still resonate with my business, which was, I know you're a strategic thinker and a big picture person, but you need to get into the details from time. That was what he was coaching me on in his last words. And if you think about how that applies to being a leader, right? Or being a business owner. And that is the answer to your question too. It's like, being involved in all those little details, knowing all the people that can help me, and then just having the confidence, day by day to do it. And it's a journey, right? Day one looked very different from the day that I am in today. But what I will say has been consistent is constantly surrounding myself with people that think like me or better than me. Right? Like that, especially, you really have to, like they say, iron sharpens iron. And that goes for being a mom, like if you find that you're around, and again, this is where presence comes in, because you can notice how you feel when you're around certain people.
100%.
When you're around other moms that are very negative or, very, just kind of have toxic mentalities, or other business owners that have those mentalities, being able to notice that, and then being able to take a different action to find those that can sort of bring you a different mindset and shift you into a mindset that is much more, not just positive, but in alignment with your desire. You get to pick your desire. The actions are the things that get you there. But if you don't have a mindset that aligns with the mind of the person you're striving to be, that's where you get stuck.
No, totally makes sense.
Well, you were saying something about learning how to manage through disruption and things that happen. Being in corporate for so many years, it's gotten so much more disruptive, right? And it's like the shareholders want this and the stock prices are down and the economy's doing this and the tariffs and and all of these things are coming at you all the time. And the picture that pops into my head is almost like a video game when you're trying to dodge like all these different like things coming at you. And so I guess what I'm saying is I don't think it's been more necessary than, and I do think, and I hope, maybe this is just wishful thinking, but I hope this next generation coming in, they do seem to have more self-care and more capacity to see that they need to like slow down a little bit. Like they're not killing themselves with 80-hour weeks and things like that. So I do have some hope with that generation. But I mean, it's so desperately needed. And I love that some of these big companies are adopting it and have been.
Yeah, because another thing that I teach people in the classes is what we need to have more of internally are conversations about our values. Like, what do you really value? And being able to know the delta, like what has changed, right? Like there was a time perhaps where you really valued hard work. And that matters, right? There are times where you do need to work hard. Like that is a part that has always been a part of life. Life has never been done without some level of hard work, whether it was agriculturally and the industrial age, all of these things. Hard work is a part of the equation, but so is rest. And so is stillness, and so is community, and so is, right? And so being able to sit down and really analyze your values and think about them and understand the role that presence, really, I say how presence plays a role in each one of those values, or if not, making presence a value. Right. It's very much a value for me because, like I said, presence is the hack. For example, if you really value human connection, right? You have people that really value community and connection. When you're present with people, right? And you can really listen mindfully, not listen to respond, but just really listen to listen. You enrich your experience with them. They feel better. You feel better, right?
It fills everybody's cup.
It's everybody's cup. And it gives you more data, right? Think about how that translates into the workplace. As an auditor, my job was to interview people. And early in my career, it was really hard sometimes even stay awake. Interviewing people, tell me about your process. And they, first I click this, and then I open this.
Oh my gosh, okay.
Right. But I'm
meditating right now.
Literally, right? Like I could have made that a mindful moment. I didn't have any training in that at the time. So my default mode was boredom, right? And getting out of here, escapism, mind wandering and daydreaming, which did not serve well in some of my evaluations. Right. Like you need to think more about, this process, because I missed it during the interview. So again, being able to look at the value and then see how presence plays a role in that. And when you think about overstimulation right now, so much of our overstimulation, there's a part of it that is certainly out of our control. But we have to acknowledge that there's a part of it that is in our control. Right. I was thinking about this the other day, really, really cool example. So my grandmother, my 84-year-old grandmother, was visiting me last week. She visited Atlanta and she stayed a week with my brother. She stayed a week with me. Towards the end of her trip, she wanted to do laundry. I noticed how she only had a little bit of laundry, but she still separated it. She had 3 small piles of laundry. And I showed her how to work the washing machine. She was intentional. No, these are delicates. So we had to turn it down to delicate. And then when the washing machine went off, she said, no, these don't go in the dryer. These go over here. And I'm just looking like, wow. I just tend to put everything in the washing machine.
I did too. I'm like, I just need to get all the laundry done.
Right. I do, separate the whites, not so much the socks.
I don't even do that.
I throw it all together.
Yeah.
And it just I went down this whole rabbit hole of thought, around how her ability to be present during her laundry process.
For sure.
Right. Preserves her clothing. It preserves her. It creates an opportunity for less overstimulation because she doesn't have to buy more things. Right. Because she has more things to hold on to. Less consumption. And Thea, if you zoom all the way out of that, right? Like a lot of our consumption is because of we're in a mindless state of mind.
Yes.
We're just consuming because we can. But when we're present, we can actually pause and ask the question, right? Like, how can I preserve this? How can I not need another thing, right? Now your consumption is going down, And perhaps your values shift. Maybe you don't need as many things, right? Or maybe you don't need to work as hard to buy as many things. Right. And so now you have more time. You see where I'm going with this? I'm actually creating a process map that will really show this in a picture format.
It makes and I do think that will really resonate. Again, so I'm talking a lot about young people because you're about to go have this event with young people.
Yeah, I am.
I do think that kind of thing will really resonate because a lot of them too are like, they don't want to be buying a lot of things and they don't want to,
They're smart. They're smart.
They're smart.
Yeah. But there's still a risk, right? I mean, because again, we have the technology that puts everything on demand. So even though young people, demographics, Gen Z, Alpha, they have different consumption habits. They have different, habits that support a healthier lifestyle, but they still have a high risk for overstimulation. They still have a high risk for anxiety.
A different
it's
source.
just a different
instant
source.
gratification of our kids, being younger, they have that so if you order something on Amazon, it's going to be here. It can be here tomorrow, and you think back to order. We used to, it's just a different thought process, right?
Yeah.
And when you talk about your grandma, I was having memories of my grandma who's no longer with us, but she used to love to do the dishes. That was her thing. She would fill up the sink and she would wash all the dishes. She loved how it felt on her hands. She had a dishwasher, but never wanted to use it. And that was part of time that I would spend with her was doing the dishes, where now it's oh my gosh, I have to put the dishes in the dishwasher and just turn it on and but that was part of an experience. So it was kind of the same thing with your grandma and the laundry. It's just a different kind of details.
And that's the hack, right? Again, I love the word. I love words like hack, biohack, and just hack in general, because you can certainly set aside defined time to practice meditation, and you can make everyday lifestyle practices a meditation.
Right.
And you can be getting bonus points. We assume we like our credit, right? Our point. You're getting credit.
Separate your laundry.
Brushing your teeth. One of my favorite mindfulness acts that is not a traditional mindfulness act is how I make my coffee. Sometimes I'll use a clear glass and I like cream in my coffee. And when I pour the cream in, just watching it swirl, just watching it reminds me of those sand zen things where you can kind of watch the sand move and float, or lava lamps. And those are meditative tools, those are zen tools. And so, creating those moments as much as you can, having those micro moments as much as you can, is part of the conditioning, right? And then you start to create the greater self-awareness around what it is that you need, right? As a person that is millennial or Gen X or boomer or older, there are certain mindset reframes that we need that are different from what Gen Z and younger may need. But the truth is, we all need something. Because the overstimulate, none of us are immune. There is not. I would say the only demographic, I don't know, I'm even hesitant to say this. I would say the older demographics are, maybe a bit more, I won't say immune, protect from the overstimulation because they have been so conditioned with slow, right? But even my grandmother, right? She's getting older. She's one of those people that, unfortunately, with COVID, created a lot of fear in her. And so she used to be an extremely active, going to the gym every day and, had a dancing and just a very active lifestyle. COVID hits and she becomes almost completely sedentary. And so now her overstimulation is through television and through, sleeping, and that creates a different level of stimulation and unhealthiness for her. And so her being with me, and again, it's contagious, her being with me and me just creating the invitation. Right. And the same at work, with colleagues, and you are sensing that their actions are not in alignment with their goals. And so we want to go in and help and train and coach and manage. But sometimes all people need is the role model of the behavior and the invitation. And when they can sense through your energy that it's worthwhile, the invitation, is a higher probability that the invitation will be met with a yes. And so when we're at work and we can sense that the younger demographic is over anxious, or maybe they don't have the resilience that we have as an older demographic, then modeling that resilience, modeling that calm, that mountain-like behavior, giving them an invitation, right? To join you on that journey of not seeing everything as a catastrophe, right? Because that is their risk. And then for us, being able to look at them and understand that having boundaries and understanding that maybe do we still need to all start work at 8 and 9?
I know.
Like,
I'm totally with you.
Could 10 to 6 work? If 10 to 7, could that possibly
I know.
could it, right? Like, I know it's change and our bodies are wired to be resistant to change, but could we rest and relax and accept, right? And imagine if 20%, if the world, 20% became more mindful, became more present, and the type of lifestyles that we would have and what work could potentially look like. Just
road
20%.
rage might go away.
Right,
Absolutely.
exactly.
But I mean, leaders, I think about people leaders, managers in the workplace, because the other day somebody was telling me, we were talking about shaking hands, and I said something about, like, when you get a terrible handshake, like, it's just, you feel like their confidence is lacking. You don't have confidence in their ability. Like, there's all these things that go with it. And I said, I feel like if you stand up tall and you shake hands, not crushing, but a nice handshake, and you smile, your presence can sometimes overshadow even your skill level. So somebody that has higher skill level,
that confidence, right?
Absolutely.
And he said, he's been in sales forever, and he goes, it's just an exchange of energy. And I loved it so much. And I think about, like, leaders, they are exchanging energy with their people. So they have a black cloud on them. It's going to go right to their people. And so if they don't know how to manage that, it creates a terrible environment.
Absolutely. Energy is transferable. Stein and Newton. I mean, that's a key principle in physics. And it's true, right? Like, first of all, we have to remember that is true. Right. And then we have to understand that, again, we're human, right? Like, it's part of the human experience is to exchange negative energy from time to time. But when you can learn how to transform that into a lesson, you can be present and self-aware enough and have the emotional intelligence and the emotional maturity to transition those moments of conflict or stress, those negative energetic exchanges, into a lesson, into wisdom. Like, one of my favorite songs is Erykah Badu, On and On. And she says in the song, peace and blessings manifest with every lesson learned, right? And so when you can get to that, now those bad moments are not as bad. They're transformative, right? And when you can understand, and that's interesting you mentioned he's in sales, right? The fact that so much of life is not about skill.
Right.
So much of life, like even learning, like the aspect of learning is less about skill and it's more about your ability to be curious.
Yes, absolutely.
That's why, like, schools are now, schools that are coming about in these different ways of teaching, they're really bringing in more curiosity and more grounding and touching and seeing and doing, right? People spend thousands, like so much money giving people, so that's how valuable it is. And so when you start to understand those just fundamental principles of life, like that's why I said going back to the basics, going back to values, understanding some basic things about how humans work, and understanding that at the end of the day, we're all observing, right? You can get to observation, right? And less judgment, more observation. And then there's plenty of time to judge and discern and decide, right? But that doesn't have to be all the time. And as an auditor, and so a lot of my job when I was an auditor was data analytics. And so, and really just being able to observe first. In data analytics, you have to collect data and you have to create some structure with the data. And then you have to just look at it. And you have to see what you see. Notice patterns. Notice what happens when you do this. Without judgment. Just seeing what you see. And then there's a space. So sometimes it's not even the same person. Sometimes you have the person that's doing the preparation and creating all of the observations. And then they send that raw set of information to someone else to do the analysis, to do the judgment, the discernment, to do the decisioning, right? Like oftentimes there's even there's a segregation of duties, right? We have to do that within ourselves, like really see it as a process. First, it's observation. And then taking that observation, taking that information, whether it's energetic, like this person has a weak handshake or too firm of a handshake, instead of immediately going to, right, they must be, couldn't we just observe that they just have a handshake that feels like that?
That's just
does it have to mean anything? Right?
We always assign meaning, right?
We're wired to assign meaning to things. And that's why I love meditation. I love meditation because it's a space to practice this. I'll just say this one last thing. It's literally the space to practice what it's like when you're sitting still and you experience boredom and you just note, I'm bored.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
Well, the thing that you said that I was like, okay, I had like a little aha moment. I always thought of meditation as like, I've seen that thing where it's like, just swipe the thoughts away. And I like that you didn't say swipe the thoughts away.
Or like empty your mind, right?
That was the thing. Yeah. So I'm like, meditation is work. Like there were times I'm like, my eyes are closed so tight because I'm trying so hard and the thoughts don't go away. Oh. But I like what you said about just like noticing them. I'm like, that is very different to me.
Yeah.
Trying to empty your brain.
Well, I'm going to go home and meditate tonight because
I know she totally
like try. Yeah, I'm like inspired. So Shawnta, like one last question I want to ask because you've done so many amazing things and you're such an amazing person. What are you most proud of?
I am most proud that I have an 8-year-old son that is, I mean, he's just such an incredible human being. And I'm not saying that because he's my son, right? I have a lot of external data to validate that. A lot of external data to validate that. But he's so present. Like he really is. He's a very present human. You know, I don't even really see him as a child most times. I see him as a really just incredible human being that has experienced so much of me at this stage of my life that he can't help but pick some of that up, right? And he's an 8-year-old boy. He's an Aries. I'm really into astrology. He has a ton of energy. He's not always focused. Sometimes I call him like a bull in a china shop. But he's so emotionally intelligent. Like he'll be frustrated if I, give him screen limit times and all that. And he'll have his little attitude and I'll say, what's wrong? And he'll literally say, I'm frustrated because I can't play on my
he
has language.
Most adults don't have
right. Very clearly. Yeah. Right. And it gives me space and sometimes my default reaction, like I was raised in a different generation where it was more authoritative and, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. And,
all those things.
I don't speak like that, but it gives me space to just say, Thank you for sharing that, and as long as it's not disruptive, right? As long as it's not disruptive, like clockwork, it usually only takes minutes before he finds something else to do, right? Before he self-regulates. And so like, I allow my experience with him to be a mindfulness practice. And I allow him to learn mindfulness, and we meditate formally from time to time, but really for him it's lifestyle, like really teaching him, right now, the value of presence, the value of being here. Right. And then making those small shifts, there's a little tip that I shared with someone recently. They're like, wow, that's good. When we go out to dinner, of course, especially if there's other adults, it's easy to just want to give them the tablet or give them the phone and all of those things. But what I try to do is remember to bring a game.
I bring a Rubik's Cube or I bring like a coloring sheet or drawing material. I'm like, you can find other things to do, or you can engage in the conversation.
Right, so because the video games are a huge source of overstimulation. They're designed to be.
Yeah, totally.
We did a ton of road trips, and of course, back in the day, road trips, I mean, we played the license plate game.
You just come up with stuff, right?
Come up with stuff.
Talk about like being present.
You are like, or like I Spy, all the things, right? I think those things are so important.
Yeah, we do bingo, and it just creates that moment. Like, and this is where, again, the discipline and the intentionality, like any moment that you can have to be okay with boredom. And I would say that's the other thing that I'm most proud of right now is the fact that I can navigate boredom with so much more ease than I used to.
That's awesome.
Right. And like really like kind of feel the anxiety in my body and just allow it to settle. The analogy that I use is when you pour soda into a glass, initially it's fizzy. It's active.
But then
and then eventually it settles every single time. And it's the same when we're experiencing boredom or even disruption or discomfort, stress, anxiety. Unless there is a true threat, right? It will always relax and calm down if you give it space to, if you allow it to. And so, and it, as we navigate the age of overstimulation, it's so important for us to return back to a bit more comfort with boredom, especially as adults that have children. Because if we can't role model that,
we can't be bored and figure out things to do.
How can we expect that? Yeah.
Shawnta, it has been amazing talking with you. It's been amazing having her in person.
And we do feel her energy.
Yes. So if people want to reach out to you or have you come and speak at their companies, like what are the best ways to contact
you can reach me on my website, ShawntaHooks.com, SHAWNTA Hooks.com, and on all social media platforms, most active on LinkedIn, Shawnta Hooks. I'm on Instagram as well and TikTok. But I speak on this topic of presence, the power of presence, and creating Clarity Lab experiences that can be keynotes or up to 4-hour engagements that just give people space to practice, give them a container to understand the value, and then they can go home and try it for themselves.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.